Season 3 of The Middle is definitely off to a strong start, and we have a very, very special guest appearance that made me quite emotional. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. I am, of course, talking about Season 3, episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through these episodes and share some thoughts. These aren't as in-depth as my discussions when I talk about the episodes individually, but I will share what happens and the positives and any negatives. But spoilers, there are no negatives. There's nothing that I didn't enjoy. The first episode is Forced Family Fun Part 1, directed by Alicia Lachemel. And this one has a brilliant start with the Hex all being very, very nice to each other. Why? Well, that's what the episode is about. We get, technically the rest is a flashback as we find out what happened. Everybody in the neighbourhood is going on vacations over the summer holidays, the summer break, and the Hex didn't. So they've decided they're going to have some family fun. They're going to go camping for 2 days. The kids don't want to go, but this is where they're going. And the car ride is chaotic, very funny, very chaotic. And it turns out that Frankie and Mike actually went camping on their honeymoon. And we get some flashbacks there. And Frankie has different hair. Mike basically looks the same, but I love it. I think it's great. And those flashbacks were really good fun. We didn't get too many of them, just the right amount. And Sue is worried about starting high school. Mike is trying to get Brick to take his head out of the book and to actually enjoy the things he's reading about around him. And everybody's just having their own little time. They're not really there as a family unit, even though they are trying to be. And then at the very end of the episode, at this point, we've arrived at the campsite. We're basically setting up everything. Nobody's having a great time. We get another flashback to the honeymoon camping trip. And then there's Ray Romano. And I absolutely love it. It's so emotional. Not so much in this episode. The next episode got more emotional. And I'll talk about that when we get there. But it's emotional because, of course, Ray Romano and Patricia Heaton were together on Everybody Loves Raymond. And I love that show so much. And to see them on screen again together, it melts my heart. I absolutely love it. And we end the episode there. We're then with Season 3, Episode 2, Forced Family Fun Part 2. This is directed by Ken Whittingham, and it picks up where the other episode left off. We have Nicky, and Nicky remembers Mike from school. Mike doesn't remember Nicky, but it doesn't seem to be a huge problem for Nicky. And then we're in the present day, and they're trying to play Monopoly with some bizarre mishmash game pieces. Nobody really cares about it. Sue's going on and on about high school. And on the one hand, I would be Sue. In that scenario, I would be Sue. I would want all of the information about going to high school. And if you've got an older sibling who goes to that school, of course you'd want to ask them loads and loads of questions, as Sue is doing. But I have to say I was on Axel's side because Sue was starting to get really, really annoying. So I would be the Sue of that scenario, but I can completely understand where Axel is coming from. We then go back and forth between present day and the honeymoon, and we spend more time with Nicky, and he's just about to leave so the newlyweds can be on their own together. And then it starts to absolutely pour down, so of course he can't go walking out in the rain, so he has to stay. And Mike and Frankie are arguing, and in the middle of the argument, it transitions to basically the same argument in present day, and the transition is perfect. It is so beautifully executed. It is amazing. The editing is phenomenal. And then we go back to the honeymoon, and this is the bit where I got really, really emotional. Because up until this point, most of the interaction had been between Nicky and Mike, which makes sense. Nicky remembered Mike. But Frankie is in the tent, and she's about to make her moves on her new husband. And it turns out that Mike's not in the tent. It's Nicky. And for maybe a minute at the most, maybe not even a minute, it's just Frankie and Nicky alone in the tent. It's Ray and Deborah Barone. It is so beautiful. And I just got so emotional because it very easily could have been a glimpse of Everybody Loves Raymond if they revived it a decade or so later. I know we had Doris Roberts playing Miss Rinsky in the previous season, but obviously the character is very different to Marie Barone, whereas that tent scene, not necessarily the dialogue between the characters, but the scene itself, I could easily imagine that being Ray and Deborah, and it broke me a little bit, and I absolutely loved it. And then we're back in present day. And we're near the end of the episode now. Still, nobody's having a great time, but they've gone to bed by this point. Sue has matured, so she's actually suddenly very happy, and it lifts the mood because we have our first look at genuine happiness on the camping trip. And then it takes a bizarre turn because Frankie remembers something that Brick said in the car. Brick was reading from his book, and he talks about the bears that could be in the area when they go camping. I don't want to go camping in the UK because it terrifies me, but I could never, ever imagine going camping somewhere where there are actual bears. That would be so scary. But Brick was reading from this book, and various things attract bears, including menstrual blood, the smell. And of course, Sue's just matured, so there is this absolute panic. And I have to say, it's probably not what Sue expected her first day or night as a woman to be like. And they rush to the car and they're clinging to each other, and we see this bear trying to get to the car, and it is so, so dramatic. And I expect no less from the Hex, to be perfectly honest. And that's the traumatic experience that made them at the start of the other episode cling to each other and be really nice to each other. So it's a really strong start to season 3. I think they're both really great episodes. The 2-part works really, really well. I think had Ray Romano not been in it, then, or like if there was no other, the honeymoon aspect wasn't that interesting or anything, then I think it would have worked as a 1-parter. But having Ray Romano in 2 episodes of the middle, I absolutely loved it. I loved it so, so much. We then come to season 3, episode 3, Hecking Order, directed by Elliot Hegarty. This is another brilliant episode. Sue is on a high from being in high school, but Axel manages to get his revenge from Sue constantly being in his face by suggesting she joins the swimming team. And she goes to the swimming pool, but then she has to get to class. And it's at the opposite end of the school. And she's constantly running. And we spend a lot of time in the episode just running with Sue through the school. There are many characters in this, many extras. I can't say for certain that it's the episode with the most extras, but we're covering a lot of distance in the school, and obviously there are a lot of students. It's very, very busy, and then Sue lands on her back, and Axel didn't flip his sister, and now she's called Turtle Girl, which is mortifying. But Sue seems bothered by that, but more bothered about the fact that she keeps getting tardies for not getting to class on time. And when they're having an argument in the house, it ends up leading to a hierarchy argument where they kind of reveal that Frankie isn't the head of the household. They think Mike is. And I thought about this, and it's interesting because we always see things through Frankie's perspective. Frankie is usually the one making the final decisions. But if you were to ask me to write down the Heck family in order, I don't know, I think maybe because of tradition I'd start with Mike. I'm not sure, actually. I might actually go Frankie and then Mike. I don't know, but either way, Frankie's not happy about this. Mike seems pretty cool, but Frankie says, well, you're in charge. You can go and talk to Brick's teacher because Brick isn't taking part in class in gym, so he does. Mike goes to see his teacher, and this is Mr. Wilkerson, played by Cordova Street, and I miss Miss Rinsky. But Mr. Wilkerson seems pretty interesting. And he has a different teaching technique. Instead of forcing Brick to do gym, he's actually just letting him stay inside and read. With the theory that eventually Brick will see all of his classmates having fun and he'll want to put down the book and join in. What an idiot. That is so stupid. Speaking as somebody who is very much the Brick in this scenario, I would much rather forever just be sitting reading a book than joining in any kind of sports or gym or physical activity. I did do PE because, well, it was mandatory and we had to do it. But if somebody said to me, you can sit on the sidelines and read a book instead, I absolutely would rather do that. So the teacher, yes, young and inexperienced, but also I find it difficult that the teacher has never once encountered somebody who'd rather read than do gym. But nevertheless, that's the story, and it just made me laugh because I genuinely can see Brick not wanting to join in ever, because that's very much me. And I imagine there are a lot of people who can relate as well. I don't care if other people are having fun without me. I want a good book. I don't want to play football or basketball or any other torture I just want to read. So I'm definitely with Brick there. And then we have a nice conversation between Axel and Sue. Axel calls her a dork optimist, which Sue takes as a big compliment. And she made it. And I genuinely felt this great sense of triumph for her, where she did. She ran through the school, managed to get to class in time, and it seems exhausting. It doesn't seem worth it. But I say that as somebody who hates swimming. So maybe I'm not the target audience for trying to succeed in getting through the school in time. But nevertheless, it was a delight to see. And the ending of the episode is really beautiful and quite emotional. We see the family helping each other out in different ways, which helps tie in the main narrative of this pecking order with Mike or Frankie at the top. But at the end of the day, what really matters is being there for each other and helping each other out rather than somebody being in charge. And then we see Axel doing something so great. One of the reasons Sue was stalled from getting to class is there were teenagers making out in front of her locker. So she was delayed getting to her locker. And a split second before she arrived at her locker, we see Axel telling those kids to move along. And it was so beautiful. And I think what's quite frustrating is that Sue doesn't know he does this. And I think that's the way Axel wants it to be. But can you imagine how amazing Sue would feel if she found out what Axel was doing for her? It was beautiful. I loved it. It's a really great episode. And then we come to season 3, episode 4, Major Changes, directed by Lee Shamel. What's interesting about this one for me is I remembered it so much. And I haven't watched the show in probably a decade. I used to binge watch it back in the day when I was at university. And then once the show ended, I didn't really watch it again. But this episode I remember so well, and I don't know why. Because most of the episodes I remember really well are from season 1. Because I think I saw season 1 more than any other season. But this one really stuck in my memory. One scene in particular, but I also love the mention of Pam Staggs. This one starts off with Frankie trying to get ready, and then she finds out that Pam Staggs is going to be on the wheel. And Pam Staggs, I don't want to say too much about the character, but I will say eventually, in quite a few seasons' time, something amazing happens. But I won't say any more than that, but it gets me very excited. And then we have the scene that I remember the most, and it's a scene that kickstarts the whole narrative. Frankie grabs the crumbs from a bag of chips, and she downs them. And then Sue points out that, I actually feel sick. Axel clipped his toenails into the almost empty chip bag. I can't. Disgusting. Maybe that's why I remember it so well, because it genuinely is one of the most revolting things I've ever seen. And of course, Frankie absolutely loses it. And she shouts that there are going to be some major changes around here, and then she leaves. She's packed a very feeble bag and has left. And the others are trying to work out what needs to change. What could she have possibly meant by that as she goes off to her mother's. And she just wants to spend some time there, I guess, away from all of the chaos. Mike goes to get her. After a bit of time, it's not immediate. He does give her some time to cool off, which I thought was really sensible. And then eventually he goes to get her, and the kids are discussing what changes they need to make so that when she comes home, it can look like she's made the effort. But they did make some good points. And while I think it was a cop-out, I don't think they brought these points up because they genuinely felt it. I thought it was an excuse to get out of doing work. But I also agree with them. One of them suggested that if they do something, but they do it wrong, then it could make her feel even worse. And I think that's very valid. If you do something, if you try and tidy or organise, but you just do it incorrect to that person's opinion, it could make them feel worse and shout at you more. And Brick also pointed out, and this is so valid, they're not mind readers. If she wanted them to change something, she should have told them. And I think that that's very true. Granted, yes, there are times when she has told them, but I think in general, she can't storm out of the door and say there are going to be changes and then expect them to make those changes before you get back without being specific. So I think there was a valid point there. And her mother actually makes her admit that her life isn't that bad and she loves her family and it's a good life. It just gets a little out of hand sometimes, which I think is completely fair enough. And then Mike phones from the car when he's picking up Frankie, saying they're coming home, and the kids go into panic mode. And they do actually tidy up. Well, they kind of brush all of the junk to one side. And Frankie comes home and she realises they've made an effort, and it's really sweet and it's a really lovely moment. So it's a nice episode. I think there are some good takeaways from this. One, do your bit. Don't be like Sue, Axel and Brick and just make a mess and cause chaos. You need to help out. But also, don't Also, don't clip your toenails into a chip bag. But also don't be like Frankie either. Don't wait until it gets completely chaotic and then pack a tiny bag and leave, because that's mean. I'm not saying she wasn't allowed to leave. She's allowed her space. But the way she did it, without giving them proper information, was cruel. That's emotionally damaging. Thankfully, she came back pretty quickly. But if Mike hadn't gone to get her, I think she might have been gone a good week. So I think there are some good lessons to be had here. Also, don't leave it until it just gets so out of hand that you snap and leave. Take intervention earlier and tell people what they need to do sooner, more forcefully, rather than just a passing comment. So some great takeaways, some great messages. The first 4 episodes of season 3 of The Middle are fabulous. If I were to rank them, I guess I'm biased, but Forced Family Fun, obviously because of Ray Romano, is definitely up there. The scene in the tent with Frankie and Nicky might be one of my favourite moments of The Middle ever. And then I guess I'd go with Hecking Order and then Major Changes. But they're all really brilliant, really thoroughly enjoyed them, and definitely looking forward to watching the rest of season 3.